Okay, so this is going to be a run through on how to take one of your paper-based Word template exam papers and put it into a Blackboard test. Now, the reason for doing this is Blackboard tests are a really great way of creating and saving and automating a great deal of the assessment process. It also gives a level of standardization to the assessments, because a big thing you want to think about in going online with something is what other online activities are students going to be doing, particularly in the case of exams. And therefore what you don't want to have is a student sitting one exam one way and one exam another way. It's one thing for paper-based exams to have different sections, section A, section B, section C, multiple choice, short answer, long answer, do 3 of these 6 or 1 from each section. That's one thing, but the way in which it's delivered and the way in which it's marked and the way in which things are uploaded are entirely different things, and therefore we need to be mindful of that in giving a consistent experience to students on a program. Okay, always got to be thinking that a program is a collection of modules, and therefore what is something that is fairly standardized across the board, i.e. exams, something that is normally centrally controlled, I suppose, and administered, kind of needs to have a consistent feel to it as well. Coursework is very different because it's very different skills, but exams have a lot of similarities in them, and so it's important to consider what tool you're using in order to achieve something very similar to what a lot of other people are going to try to achieve. So what I'm going to go through here is you basically build it in Blackboard, and I'll open up an exam paper to give you an idea. You can build them from scratch. For the most part, there'll be a lot of copying and pasting of older stuff. So I'm going to show you an example that includes multiple choice questions and short answer questions. And I'll show you one that I've built already. And then you can adapt that as you see fit. But really what we're saying is that the vehicle is the same by it being Blackboard Test. So you go into the module that the exam is going to sit in. In this case, I'm going to pick this level 2 module that I did the other day. And there was already an assessments menu, course menu item within this module for the coursework and things like that. It makes sense to either create an exam specific course menu area so that on the day when the students sit the exam, they know exactly what to look at, or of course you give them a brief beforehand that tells them that they'll find the exams in the assessment folder. Again, it's important to be consistent across a whole suite of modules that may contain the same students. Now I've built it here. Okay, I'll show you how to do that in a minute. It was all very simple and fairly intuitive. So what I've got here is Physio Exam 2020. This has the exam instructions on it, so that before they even open the thing and begin it, they get the instructions up front. Okay. Now the way that I built it was go to any content area. These are all content areas within this Blackboard module, and you go to assessments and test. Okay. And so here we have tests that have already been created in this module but haven't yet been launched, and there's only one here. But what you're going to be doing if you're converting or building from scratch is doing create. Okay. Within create, give it a normal one. So Summer Exam 2020. You can give it you'll give it a description. This will be the course instructions or the exam instructions that you'll give. But you can add that later on for the purposes of today. So I'll just type this in there. Okay, but you can edit that later. Then submit. And it really is just working through the buttons. Now here, create question. For the most part, if you are adopting a paper-based one, you're either going to have short answer questions, essay questions, or multiple choice questions. Okay. If you've done online assessments before, you may have varied online questions such as matching pairs, sequential, word bank, spot questions, all the kinds of ones that I use in my iSpring quizzes. But for the purpose of this, because we're adopting old into new, as it were, there's only really a few of these question types you're going to use. So multiple choice, where there's only one correct answer, as opposed to multiple option, multiple choice, which would be one or more correct answers. Don't give it a question title, just type, because it will automatically assign it a numerical value. It'll call this question 1 because it's the first one I've made. You can change the order of them afterwards. So what you would do is paste in, copy and paste the text of your question there. And so what you want to do here is go to your exam paper in question. It's a good idea to strip out all the formatting that you can. So remove any bullet points, any numerical bullet points, anything like that. And because it will take bullet points and indentations with it. So just select, Control C, go in, Control V. Now, because there may be different font sizes, font variations in your exam paper, even if only subtle, it's a good idea to do Control A and just tap on this remove formatting, and it will default back to Arial size 3 or 12 point in Blackboard. Then from there you just scroll down. In the case of this original paper there were 5 responses, so I have to change the number of answers to 5. It will then briefly refresh, and then all you do is copy in each one. And you run that down, putting them in there. Let's just type something for answers 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then select whichever one is the correct answer by clicking on the radio button. Then you do submit and create another, because you're just doing a series of MCQs. And so you repeat that process over and over again, lots of copying and pasting. There's no easy way around this. You can import questions into a Blackboard test, but the way that you have to set them up, they can only be imported from a delimited tabbed Excel file, and the way that you have to set that up in terms of the cells, there's no way of converting an existing exam paper into that format to import it in. So it is a lot of copying and pasting job. It took me about an hour to copy and paste and reformat, I suppose, a 40 question MCQ with 8 short answer questions, and that was with quite a lot of removing formatting. So it doesn't take that long to do, and the point being, once you've done it, you can save that and you can add questions to it later if you decide to go online forever. You can add new questions, you can reformat it, you can add in different types of questions, you can have it choose from a question bank. So once you've got it in place there, you then you have that question, you have all your questions locked in, and then what you're going to do is run through a series of options. There we go. So we've got one question there, and that is pretty much it done. All right, so here's the upload questions if you had an Excel thing available. You can assign different points to it, so you can give each MCQ, if you tick all the questions that you want to have that, and see here I've typed in 1 point because they're currently worth 10, and update. There you go. And now that question is worth 1 point. All right. You can manually add the questions this way, so click on the plus and choose various types. What I'm going to show you how to do now is simply a short answer, because that's the other kind that you're likely to wanting to be convert. So again, you just type in what the question is. You don't have to about giving it a number. So okay. Makes no sense as a question. There we go. Choose the number of rows. Good idea to choose the maximum, just to give them lots of room to work without it being ridiculous. And then you can change some of these. You can add a rubric if you want to see the marking criteria for different questions, but that's largely going to be in the area beforehand. So then you submit that. That one is done. Okay. Nice and simple. So you do that for the whole thing and then click on OK. Now I gave that short answer question 10 points, and now see here Summer Exam 2020 is listed in my bank of exams that I can use. Then click on Submit. And then it gives you a variety of new options that you can use to control it. So for example, show the test description beforehand. Yep, we want to see the instructions. Open a new window. Yes, because then that decreases the chance of them looking at various things. Don't want to make it available to them yet, but you might want to, and then add a date to it. You only really want them to have one attempt. Okay, you could tick multiple attempts and do 2 just in case something goes wrong, and don't tell them. Score with the first graded attempt. That way, even if there's 2, even if they think I'll have another go afterwards, or oh, it says I can do it again, it will only count the score of the one that made it through first. Okay. If you want to make it one where you want them to be able to come back to it later, so say one consideration at the moment is that schools have closed. There may be some students with children running around the house. Do you want to give them the option of being able to sort of pause the exam, deal with something home related, and then come back? Or do you feel that that may risk too much looking things up in textbooks or finding answers by some other way, and therefore you want them to do it in one sitting? So by doing forced completion, this means once you've started, you've got to finish it. Okay. Setting a timer is a really great idea. You can turn auto submit on or off. So if I make this 120 minutes, let's give it 2 hours. Auto submit on. As soon as the time expires, it gets submitted whether they finished or not. Okay, so if you really want to make it like an exam on campus, that's a pens down way of doing it. You've got the display dates like any item on Blackboard. You could give it a password if you wanted, but because they'll be doing it at home, that's sort of irrelevant. Don't need to worry too much about a due date, because you're giving it a visibility. They won't actually be able to do the thing before then anyway. And then you can choose whether you give them feedback or not. In the situation we're in, it's probably not a great idea to give feedback. Tell them what the right answers were, just in case of any chance of collusion, of passing on the correct answers. Might be that we make them available later on, but just to follow the normal ways of exam papers, where they don't traditionally get the exam paper back to see what was right and what was wrong unless they sit down with you. Might as well keep it just what the score is, but not whether they were correct or incorrect. And then all at once or one at a time. Do you want them to go sequentially through where they can't change their answers? So we have here prohibit backtracking. So once they've locked in an answer, they can't change their mind. Good idea to give them more free range. Because you're only doing one attempt, this randomize the options, randomize the questions, again, is a bit irrelevant. If you wanted them to have multiple attempts, say it was a formative one that you wanted them to do as practice because they've never done a Blackboard test before, or an online exam of any kind, maybe you want to have a formative version of this to give them a chance, and therefore randomizing the questions so that the summative one is different is probably a good idea. So then you submit that there. And there we go. Down the bottom of the screen here is the exam. Now it's hidden from the students, so I can make it available, or indeed edit the options again. If you want to edit any of the questions, if you chose the wrong correct answer, you can go to edit the test and go through any of the processes that I just showed you. The other thing you can do is say duplicate the test, okay, or put up another version of it, and then do adaptive release. And once you've duplicated it, give it a different time. Now this is for those who may have reasonable adjustments of extra time. There's not much we can do for scribes and screen readers and things like that. But if it's a student with extra time, you can make a group in Blackboard and populate that group with all those people on your class list for reasonable adjustments that have 25% extra time. Then in adaptive release, you would make the visibility membership that group or those people, okay? And that way only those people will actually be able to see that version of the exam, or the students with standard time conditions, I suppose, won't be able to see it. Okay, so that's a way of creating something of the way of reasonable adjustments while still having a time limit on the thing. Now I have, with the paper I made up here, even though this is my area, I tried Googling the answers to the multiple choice questions, bearing in mind it had a time limit on it with auto submit. It was very difficult to find the correct answer to an MCQ in less than a minute. And really that's what MCQs are often based on a minute per question. So there's not too much risk, I think, with looking up answers. And if you decide, if there is a decision made about how it's going to be timetabled, then that should take account of any kind of collusion possibilities there are. So that's really how you make a Blackboard test. You can do it for multiple choice questions or short answer questions or a combination of the two. You can also do a long essay question. If I go down to this one at the bottom, edit the test, I could add a question and you could make it an essay question, or which would be them filling in the information just in a short answer question. Now that's quite good for if you want to do essays and you want them to, when the time ends, that's it, whatever they've written, they are done, it will auto submit. The other way you can go, if you want to incorporate references or particular formatting or diagrams, anything like that, you could have a file response question. So the file response question would be the actual question of the exam or the essay, whatever it is, and they would write their response in Word or Excel or whatever the most suitable format is and upload that for you to mark. So it involves opening the document just like you would a piece of coursework and marking it that way, which gives you more free rein on how you mark it and how you provide feedback, if you do provide feedback. But if they haven't uploaded a file by the time the exam ends, they wouldn't be able to. So it's almost safer if you want to put an auto submit aspect to the conditions by having it as an essay, because it saves as they go. They can click on a save button, but it does save most, I think every keystroke. Every now and then it pops up and says response saved, and it saves what they've typed so far. So if you want to make it lock down, pens down at the end, go with an essay question. If you want to not have an auto submit, you can give it a time, and then at the end of that time they have to upload their file, however long that takes them to do. So there's a bit of variation in there as to how you can control it, and that's going to be down to the module leader and whatever's most appropriate for that kind of assessment. So I hope you found that useful. Hopefully you found it easy to go through. Do feel free to ask me any questions about that sort of thing. It is very adaptable to a whole range of what would be traditional paper-based assessments. It's one that you can get support for, and it's one that has a bit of traction in terms of more people understanding how they work.